Mr. Speaker, I would tell the gentleman that it is clear we're talking about production that's going to be happening over the next several years, and these mandates give us a decade to be able to, not only do we know today that the cost per kilowatt hour of renewables is certainly on par with every other source that is out there, but on top of that, Mr. Speaker, we have an opportunity to make further advancements, and we've got time to do it. This is a plan that takes us there, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate report, floor amendments. Okay.
Mr. Speaker, there are two separate floor amendments, both offered by Delegate Toscano. The first is on line 47 of the introduced as amended by the committee. His amendment would strike all of lines 47 through 65. Strike all amendments through lines 47 through 65 and insert the following, one sentence. Beginning on July 1, 2019, unless preempted by applicable federal law, there shall be a moratorium on approval by any permitting agency of any permit, certificate, or other approval required for any new pipeline with a diameter in excess of 40 inches for the transport of natural gas that requires the use of eminent domain on private property.
I'll ask you. Delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano. Delegate Toscano, can we handle this in a block, or do you want these segregated?
Separate.
Separate. Okay. Delegate Toscano has the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Speaking to the amendment.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I know that there are some concerns about the nature of this so-called moratorium on fossil fuel, major fossil fuel projects. And if you looked at the substitute and were willing to vote for the substitute, the whole language of this section would have been stripped out of the bill, so there would not have been any moratorium. And that's why when the delegate from Roanoke said that when you voted for the committee amendment, you essentially voted today yourself for a moratorium on all fossil fuel activities. Now, I'm giving you a chance today to step back from that vote, because you now have a chance to vote to strip out the language that would have a moratorium on all fossil fuel activities. It's drawn directly to the provisions in the bill, and all it does is substitute a couple of different words that speaks to big pipelines. So if you have any concerns about a big pipeline that you don't think is a good idea, but you don't want to get rid of all pipelines and you don't want to prevent moratoriums on all future fossil fuel activities, you should vote for this amendment. And I'd ask you to do so.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Speaking to the amendment.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the delegate from...
Delegate has the floor. Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, I apologize in raising the question, but when I look at the underlying legislation as it came from committee, there was nothing in that measure as it related to any type of pipeline project specific. It spoke to quite the contrary. Everything was about energy generation, distribution, things of that nature. I would just question, Mr. Speaker, whether this amendment is germane, given that it is much narrower in its scope than the original legislation, especially as it relates to the provisions of the moratorium, because this is not a subset of what was in the original moratorium provisions, but is a totally different object.
This is about as narrow as you can get. It narrows it, doesn't go beyond the bill. I don't think this is a close call, guys.
There's nothing in the moratorium relative to pipelines. And
I mean, you look at the bill, up at the time, it was moratorium on major fossil fuel projects, energy mandates that come down here, and the moratorium on new major fossil fuel projects, and list those in detail. And instead of that type of moratorium, is putting in a moratorium or approval of any, I mean, the distinction would be any new pipeline
And the point I'm making is that's not what's in the current laundry list of the original legislation. So as it narrows it on the one hand, it goes beyond.
That's what's in the original legislation.
So it's a moratorium, and the moratorium up in the title and your thought, figure that for you to decide, obviously, but it's
But could this then, if we offered a floor amendment, to be a moratorium in any kind of
I think the amendment's germane. Thank the delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Speaking to the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to thank the delegate from Charlottesville for giving us an opportunity to vote on our principles. I think we're going to do that shortly. And I would yield to the delegate from Caroline.
Delegate from Caroline, Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, I'd move to pass by the amendment.
Delegate Orrock moves to pass by the amendment. All those.
Mr. Speaker?
Delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
Speaking to the motion,
Delegate has the floor.
I find it ironic that the delegate from Shenandoah says, well, here's where we have our chances to vote on our principles, and what do we get? A movement to pass by the amendment. You not even want to vote on the amendment. Now, we know what the pass by the amendment means. It means that you're voting for a moratorium on all fossil fuel activities, right? That's what it's going to mean, so let everybody notice around here what's happening. I ask you to vote against the motion to pass by, and maybe we will get a chance to vote on our principles.
The motion is to pass by the amendment. All those in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Chair is in doubt. Ayes and nays are called for. Shall the amendment be passed by? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 51, noes 48.
Ayes 51, noes 48. The amendment is passed by. So now we're on your second amendment, I think, Delegate Toscano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I need to report it.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
I'm sorry, the clerk will report a floor amendment.
Floor amendment number 2 offered by Delegate Toscano, to the on line, 2 parts of it. On line 102 of the introduced, after the word that, line 102, after the word that, strike the number 40 and insert the number 20. Then 2 lines further on, line 104, after the word color, insert, and 20% shall be allocated to sea level rise mitigation and recurrent flooding adaptation measures.
Delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the amendment.
Delegate has the floor.
So, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, here's an opportunity for you to speak out in favor of sea level rise mitigation and recurrent flooding adaptation measures. We know it's a very serious problem, and it's happening whether or not you agree with climate change. And we know it's going to be very costly for places like Virginia Beach, Norfolk, other places in and around the coastal areas to solve a problem that's coming at us. So here's your opportunity to say, okay, at least if this bill passes, we want to allocate 20% of the funds for that purpose. I hope you will vote for the amendment.
Delegate from Caroline, Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, I move to pass by the amendments in a block.
Delegate Orrock moves to pass by the amendments in a block. All those in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Chair is in doubt. Ayes and nays are called for. Shall the amendments in a block that were just referenced be passed by? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 51, noes 48.
Ayes 51, noes 48. The amendment is passed by. The clerk will